Hi again. So, we're going to continue with Ericksonian language patterns, and this is part 2. So what I want to look at now are embedded commands and suggestions. In this part of the video Prezi, I'm going to talk about embedded commands and suggestions, and I'll be giving you some examples as well of something called the inverse meta model, sometimes also known as the Milton model. So let's start with embedded commands and suggestions. If you begin to think about what a command sounds like, it will help you to make sense of this easily and simply. Okay, so let's do that again, only this time I'm going to use tonal marking to a greater extent. You do remember what tonal marking is, to mark out the embedded commands. So let's start with the embedded commands and suggestions. If you begin to think about what a command sounds like, it will help you to make sense of this easily and simply. So there are your 3 embedded commands. Start with embedded commands. Begin to think about what a command sounds like. Make sense of this easily and simply. So there are many ways in which you can emphasize words. You can slow your voice down. You can drop the pitch. You can raise the pitch. You can speed things up. You can mark out certain words in a certain manner. As with all language patterns, the more you pile one embedded command upon another, the less likely you are to encounter conscious awareness or resistance to what you're saying. It simply flows, and people stop noticing in a conscious way what it is that you're actually suggesting. You may also remember from the previous section that using awareness predicates makes it easy to slip embedded commands into your dialogue. In fact, the more you use awareness predicates, the more you are going to find yourself using embedded commands naturally and fluently. And I don't know exactly how you will capture the imagination of your audience. It isn't immediately obvious what you will do to ensure their engagement. Perhaps you may remember to emphasize certain words and phrases. Or maybe you'll just invite them to recall a time when they begin to recall more and more information about the topic, because you know they are going to think about this right now. Not because you want them to think about this right now, but because they can choose to think about this right now. I think you get my drift. Here's an example I made up about a history lesson using some awareness predicates and embedded commands. So I don't know to what extent you can put yourself in the shoes of Charles II as he stepped off the ship onto British soil to assume the crown in 1660. You may be aware of the crowds that he witnessed, or perhaps you can imagine the pride mixed with apprehension which you must have been experiencing as Charles II. After all, as Charles II, you can remember what happened to your father just 11 years earlier, and you can also experience just how powerful it feels to be truly popular and to be genuinely and enthusiastically welcomed back by the vast majority of your subjects. So when you begin to plan your project now, you can easily include some references to the emotions as well as to the sequence of events. And whether you do it now or simply gather more information, and then complete it for next Tuesday's lesson. The way to do this really effectively is to imagine yourself in the role, in the shoes of Charles II himself, if you can really imagine this now. Okay, so let's talk as well about Milton model patterns. Now, for those of you that have already studied neuro-linguistic programming, you'll be familiar with the meta model. And there are lots of these patterns, and once you're familiar with the meta model, they're simple to apply. So if you recall, the meta model is a set of 15 violations of well-formed English which open a window upon another person's model of the world. So, for example, here are some meta model patterns. Someone is going to do it. It might be any one of them. That's what makes it worse. One just cannot accept it. It happens to everyone sooner or later. It never works. They shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. But no one can stop them. People like you just do it. You know you really want to, just like always, just like everyone else. So you know what's going to happen. It's a classic situation. You know what it means, but you do it anyway. It means we're all condemned to suffer. And it's all because no one is willing to commit. The more I think about it, the more I get mad. If it happens again, I'm going to get really angry. It's just not fair. So, in that sequence, we used all 15 violations, and in fact some of them more than once. So let's just look at what they are. Simple deletion, unspecified verbs and nouns, comparative deletions, and unspecified referential indices. So just to remind you, a deletion is any sentence or phrase where something is left out, which is pretty much any phrase or sentence. And what's interesting is what specifically has been left out and what has been included. So the second category of meta model violations are generalizations. So these are universal quantifiers, presuppositions, and a variety of modal operators. So modal operators of necessity, possibility, action, and desire. And then finally we have the third group of meta model violations, which are distortions, mind reading, nominalizations, complex equivalence, cause effect, and loss performatives. So have a go at seeing if you can spot each of those patterns in the sequence on the left hand side of this frame now. And if you want to freeze the video at this point, pause the video, please do so. Okay, so now all you have to do to become artfully vague, to start to use the Milton model in combination with your Ericksonian language patterns, is to practice the deliberate use of these meta model violations in pursuit of a well-formed outcome. So in other words, you're deliberately using these violations, but you're using them consciously to a certain extent with a particular outcome in mind. So let's string a few of these together now. It isn't necessary to work on it now, because the more you think about it first, the more you will begin to discover what every intelligent person discovers, that it's actually very easy. I mean, I know you want to succeed without working a lot harder. And this opportunity is a perfect example of how you can achieve everything they want you to achieve. And you can and you will, not because you have to, but because you just decide to do it like this. So that soon it will become automatic. Soon you'll discover what all people have discovered. All people who have succeeded at this have also discovered that you begin to get it right because you are just the kind of person who does so. And if you think about it, and I know you will, it will become a pleasure for you to study and to learn and to achieve fantastic results. So just go for it. Just do it now. Then celebrate when you have achieved more than you ever dreamt possible. So, once again, if you'd like to pause the video and just see how many meta-model violations, or if you like, Milton model patterns, because we're seeking to influence people through the deliberate, artful use of vagueness. See how many of these patterns you can spot in this sequence. Okay, so that was pretty vague, although there are lots of embedded commands in there too. So once you've spotted them, write out your own sequence using all 15 meta-model violations. And if you want to, you can think about this in the context of an actual lesson or a message you want to convey to an audience. It doesn't really matter whether they're students or your team members or any other context in which you're seeking to influence people, to steer people in the direction of a specific outcome or set of outcomes. And again, you can pause the video and do this now, or you can do this at the end of the video. You might even want to slip a couple of extra patterns in there, do you think? I mean, you already know how to stack realities, build a chain of causal links. And as you sit listening to this or watching, and you hear my voice, and you begin to think about how you're going to integrate all of these patterns into the way you communicate key messages to your audience, aren't you? Then you can also notice, can you not, that new patterns can creep in too, can't they? Yes. And I know you agree, don't you? That getting people into a yes mentality can be useful, if a little unsubtle at times, can it not? However you set about doing this, you will find your own way, whether you do it now or as soon as this video finishes, because all people can improve the way they communicate. Remembering too that the use of vivid, colourful and sensory rich language will enhance and embellish the use of these techniques.